welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 103, and this is the current economic collapse news brief for Saturday. And there was an interesting article in Investment Watch blog. The market trap is being set with China, EU, UK, Japan, etc. We are in full collapse mode. And basically what is happening, the collapse, and I've done this in an episode before, and it's funny they're using the same term, is right at our doorsteps. Basically, it goes on to say it looks like the collapse is at our doorstep, and it's knocking at our door. With China, EU, UK, Japan in full collapse mode, they are expecting to see a major bank failures soon followed by bail-ins and extreme money printing later this year. And basically, I was thinking that this is pretty much right on target because whatever the Fed, government, Goldman Sachs, whatever they say, it is always the opposite. Goldman Sachs came out and told us that the Fed is going to start to taper in September because of this. The economy is doing so great, and the job numbers came out. They're fantastic. Everything's looking great. The stock market's hitting all-time new highs. And basically what they're telling us is going to be the opposite. Things are going to start to fall apart rapidly. And in my other episodes, I've kind of laid out what I think is going to happen during this collapse, and I believe something is going to happen around September, October, and I think the market is going to take a huge dive, and they are going to do everything to pump it up, and I guess you can consider this a dead cat bounce, and we're going to see it rise again, and in January or so, this baby's just going to come completely falling apart. And this is how I think this is going to happen. And as we look further down here, Mark Farber, the whole thing he's saying will end in disaster. They are not going to tighten monetary policies anytime soon. They are in the driver's seat in the sense that they will always find an excuse to print more money, and they always will. They will say, okay, we have to increase the purchases of assets because now the yield on Treasury bonds has gone up substantially from less than 1.5% on the 10-year note a year ago to 2.68% as of today. So they will say that may damage the economy, so we have to buy more assets. And that's basically what's going to happen. They are going to continually to pump out more and more money and buy more assets until the very end. They are not going to stop. And I said this before, that things that these people say, and not these people, but I'm thinking back and I'm remembering back to 2008, and I heard, and I was watching the mainstream media at that time, and I heard news reporters and everything saying that the recession will end by the fall or the spring of 2009, and everything will be okay. And then they said it will end, the September of 2009. And they always make up crap because they have no idea what they're talking about. They're getting their information from the same people that tell us that they don't see a recession forecasted for 2008. They contained the subprime mortgage-backed security problem. They do not see a housing bubble. They don't see a stock market bubble. They don't see a treasury bond bubble. They don't see a student loan bubble. They don't see anything. They see no bubbles whatsoever. They just see things getting better and better. And back in 2007, 2008, Business Week, basically, and U.S. Today, all reported on the false predictions made just before the 2008 subprime credit meltdown spread rapidly across America and the world. And basically, Mad Money Jim Cramer reported during this time period before the crash, bye-bye bear market, say hello to the bull. Ken Fisher, this year will end in the plus column, so keep buying. Ben Bernanke, no. Serious failures among large international active bankers. So basically, no serious failures among large international bankers. That was Ben Bernanke. Goldman Sachs, fear priced into stocks is likely to abate as recession fears fade. Barney Frank, Freddie Mac, and Fannie Mae are fundamentally sound. Barron's, home prices about to bottom, and we know they went much further down. Worth Magazine, emerging markets are the global investors' safe haven. Bernie Madoff, it's virtually impossible to violate the rules, and basically it goes on and on and on. And back in 1929, they were saying the same thing. I mean, if you go back to that time, we had, in 1929 when the market started to fall. And remember, in 1932, it really took a deep, deep plunge. And we had things like in the New York Times, we feel that the fundamentally Wall Street is sound and that for people who can afford to pay for them outright, good stocks are cheap at these prices. And it goes on to say, Treasury Secretary Andrew W. Mellon, I see nothing in the present situation that is either menacing or warrants pessimism. I have every confidence that there will be a revival activity in the spring, and during this coming year, the country will make steady progress. And he said this in 1929, in December 31st of 1929. And we know for a fact that things didn't get better. And even the president back then, President Herbert Hoover, the Depression is over, and he said this in 1930, and in 1932, the stock market completely fell apart, and everything just went to crap during that period. And we can see that things are not good around the country, around the world, and there are 41 IMF bailouts and counting. Basically, broke nations now are bailing out other broke nations with borrowed money. So it's dead, like a nation that has no money is bailing out another nation and loaning that money out, and they just keep piling debt upon debt upon debt. And basically, the IMF gets their money from a bunch of nations that are absolutely drowning in debt themselves. So how possibly can anything work? And there's 41 different countries doing this. So at this point, we know for a fact that this is completely unsustainable. Just think of it in basic terms. If you have a block of people in each individual families, and all of them have $40,000 worth of credit card debt, and each one of these families bring in $20,000, and this $20,000, the first family who has $40,000 worth of debt and they make $20,000 a year is loaning the second family money on borrowed money. Here, I'll take out some more borrowed money on this credit card. Here's $10,000 to help you guys out. But they're now in debt, and the other family is in more debt. Now that family goes ahead and says, listen, I know you're in a tough situation, so are we. Here's $20,000 that I just put on this credit card to help this other family out. And it's a cascading debt on top of debt problem, and the income coming in of $20,000 can never ever pay any of this off. And where does this end? In complete collapse of the families, which is called bankruptcy. Now, Bloomberg News is reporting derivatives collusion. Traders may need from $2 trillion to $4 trillion in extra collateral to meet the new requirements that are coming up. Margin calls coming on U.S. too big to fail banks. Now there are 13 banks, okay, that the EU is accusing. Now who are these banks? Well, here are some of the banks that the CDC is probing and looking into: Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, Chase, Credit Suisse, Deutsche, Morgan Stanley, Bank of America, HSBC, Royal Bank of Scotland, UBS, and we can see that all of these banks who are insolvent are being probed to see what is going on. Basically, what's happening is that starting next year, new rules will force banks, hedge funds, and other traders to back up their bets now in the 648 trillion derivative market by posting collateral. Basically, what's happening is they don't have collateral. They won't be able to basically put and back up all of their bets. And there's a major margin call on the U.S. holding banks that is coming next year. And this is going to make the entire system completely come tumbling down. And I think it's funny and I think it's very interesting that these banks who are involved in the bailouts and all these banks that are imposing bail-ins now and changing their terms of service and all this stuff are the ones implicated in this probe. Now, we've heard a lot of talk about China becoming the world reserve currency, and the Bundesbank warns China's currency on its way to becoming global reserve currency. The Bundesbank board member, I'm going to try to pronounce this, Joachim Nagel, noted in a speech entitled Renminbi as a potential reserve currency this week, the Chinese currency is well on its way to becoming one of the future global reserve currencies. And we have to remember that nothing lasts forever. Reserve currencies come and go. Before World War II, the sterling was the reserve currency of the world. And if we look back, and I have this on this page, in 1400 to around 1525, Portugal was the reserve currency. From 1525 to around 1650 or so, Spain was. And again, I said Britain was the reserve currency for quite a while, from around 1800 to 1945, 47 or so, and now the United States is the reserve currency. So basically, this is what's happening. The latest development in global currency relations should come as no surprise to those who have followed our series on China's slow but certain internationalization of its currency over the past 2 years. And basically, China, is making deals. So this is what's happening. China, Russia dropped dollar in bilateral trade. China and Iran to bypass dollar. India and Japan signed new 15 billion currency swap agreement. Iran, Russia replaced dollar with ruble in trade. India joins Asian dollar exclusion zone. Will transact with Iran in rupees. The U.S. dollar trap is closing. Dollar exclusion zone crosses the Pacific as Brazil signs China currency swap, and thanks world reserve currency, but no thanks Australia and China to enable direct currency convertibility. So as you can see, the United States is doing everything to keep the status, and actually the central bankers and the government are doing whatever they can to keep the United States as the reserve currency. That's why the government is in Syria and wants to get into Iran, trying to hold control over Egypt, Libya, Lebanon, you name it, Saudi Arabia, you name it. They're trying to keep control. They were trying to push North Korea around, because at the time, North Korea was making a deal with Iran to bypass the dollar, and that's why you saw all that provoking of North Korea and all those scare tactics of North Korea is going to bomb us with nuclear weapons, we're going to have to do something, and they were trying to push North Korea and stop them from making the deal, but the deal went through, and that deal is now done. And basically, Syria is not trading in the United States dollar as a reserve currency, neither is Iran. And basically, the United States government and central bankers are worried about Egypt because what is happening with the revolution and the ousting of Morsi. And speaking of Egypt, yesterday I told you that the Turkish government is going to change Article 35, where they're going to put a provision in there that says the uh, the provision will say that uh, the people cannot rise up and a coup cannot take place. And basically, this just because it's written on paper doesn't mean anything. There's a lot of laws and a lot of things written on paper. Here in the United States and all over the world, it says murder is illegal, but people still do it. Committing robbery is illegal, but people still do it. Just because you say you can't have coups doesn't mean it's going to stop people from having coups. Let's move on here. Now, the West, Britain, France, and the United States are still trying to make the case against Syria and provide evidence that they used chemical weapons on the people. And we know for a fact that the chemical weapons that were used were from the rebels, which aren't even Syrian, which are paid mercenaries from the United States government. And because what they're trying to do is create an uprising and take over the Syrian government and remove Assad from power so they can implement a central bank, a Western central bank, I should say, and make the U.S. dollar the reserve currency there and have a straight path to Iran. And they're trying their last-ditch efforts to make a case, because they are losing the battle, that the Syrian government used chemical weapons on the people, and it's not going to work. The people of America, the Congress, they don't care. They don't want to have anything to do with it. The Congress is pushing a bill through where it would like to stop the Obama administration from supplying weapons and funds to the rebels, and basically right now the Obama administration has to do everything to get this war started with Syria before this, basically this bill, is passed and it screws everything up. But they will do something to get this war started, even if it takes some type of horrific false flag here in the States, where people die, they blame it on Syria, and all of a sudden the people are begging for war and we get into war. And this is how they do it, because normally people do not want to go to war, especially with the polls right now showing that 70% of Americans want to have nothing to do with Syria. And the same thing with Congress. They don't have anything to do with Syria right now. And the only way to push people into begging for war is to pretend that the country actually didn't attack on the United States and blame it on Syria. And when Americans see people dying from a chemical false flag, let's say in the New York City subway system, which is a drill coming up, we don't know what days they're going to be, but people will be outraged, and the government will use that to try to force an all-out war with Syria. And if that happens, Russia is backing Syria, and this will turn into World War III. Now, let's move on here. It's very interesting that we have this revolution going on in Egypt, and it was yesterday. It was broadcasted that the military was firing on the people, and the Egyptian military said, absolutely not, we were not firing on the people. So who was firing and making these things happen? It was probably paid mercenaries and paid people to create this type of situation where people take sides. It looks like people are shooting and things are going haywire. and crazy. And this is the way the U.S. government plays. They make things become confused for the people. They make it so they take sides, and the government needs to make sure that the next person in power is on their side. And they're also taking this entire situation. And let me just say this, the government right now is nervous because this entire thing is completely out of control, and the Egyptian people do not want a leader that has ties to the U.S. government and Obama. They want nobody controlling this new leader, and the U.S. government is very worried, and the central bankers are very worried about this because they have the reserve currency and the central banks, and they control Egypt right now, and they spend a lot of money in Egypt. And if a leader is elected and put into power that has no ties to the government, there is going to be problems. And we might even see the United States government use military force to switch back the government to the one they like. But they're also using this situation, and never let a good type of situation go to waste. If you remember back with Benghazi, it was in the mainstream media, then it was pushed aside, and the whole thing is basically a really a black eye on the Obama administration. But this new report coming out, and the U.S. government is great for doing this, and this is a great cover-up for Benghazi. They are telling everyone that Morsi was the one involved in the Benghazi attack. And they're using this revolution and the removal of Morsi, and now they have their patsy to blame Benghazi on. And this is the case that they're trying to do. Basically, this says Libyan intelligence, Muslim Brotherhood, Morsi involved in U.S. consulate attack. And we know this is BS, and we know this is not true, but they needed someone to blame this on, and this is a perfect time since he's been pushed out of power. And what's funny is, how come they didn't say this before? How come they didn't mention this before? But, since he's been pushed out of power and taken away, it's great to blame him now. Okay, let's move on here. Now, I've always said, when we see the government taxing us more, when they take away more of our rights, when we see more military training with local law enforcement, with DHS, we know the collapse is coming quicker than we really believe it ever would. And we're seeing more and more military taxes and rights being taken away every day. And recently, North Carolina National Guard Rapid Reaction Force for Civil Unrest Training. And basically, they were doing this at an abandoned mall and in a field. And basically, the exercise depicted, they were held from June 10th to the 14th. And basically, soldiers trained to suppress protesters who perform a sit-in as part of a fictional group called the Pink Panthers. And according to the Carolina National Guard, the exercise at the water treatment facility tests soldiers' ability to use non-lethal force to disperse a crowd of aggressors. And we can see that they're completely training for a situation where people begin to protest. Okay, let's move on here. Now, basically every picture you take your phone is encoded with your GPS location. And I speak to a lot of people, and a lot of people shrug off, oh, it's no big deal that they're spying on me. I'm not doing anything wrong. So what if I take a picture and they know where I am? Who cares if they look at all my internet stuff? This is the problem with this. Yes, You might not be doing anything wrong, but you have to remember what the government is doing. This happened in Nazi Germany and many other countries. They are profiling you. They are they don't care about your one or two searches. They are putting together a profile, seeing your movements, seeing who you meet with, seeing what the pictures you take and who is in these pictures and where were you when you took these pictures, and they're putting this all together because what happens is, let's say you email someone and that person is part of a certain group. You're at a function, you take a picture, and in that picture is the person, or the picture is taken of you, and you're with a group of people, and the person in that picture has ties to a certain group that is on their list. I hate to say this, it's guilt by association, and that's what they're doing. They are profiling everyone and putting them into groups. They don't care if you come out and say, well, he's just my friend. I didn't know he was part of this. They don't care. They don't. They are profiling you and lumping you into groups, and this is why everyone needs to be concerned about this. Not just, the most important thing is it's a violation of our Fourth Amendment and the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and everything else, and they're liars and basically, but this is why they're doing this. They want to see where you're going. Now I'll use another example. I don't care if they track where I move, where I go, or where I am. Well, let's say at 2 o'clock you were in this restaurant at the same time that these leaders were meeting to set up a coup to take over the government, and you just happened to be there because of your location. You might have not known those people, but guess what? You've just been profiled. You went to that meeting now. This is why you need to be concerned about all of this. Okay, let's move on. Now, the Port of Baltimore is, they've done a test and a study, and they're saying they're vulnerable to cyber attacks. And a lot of ports are in the same group that they are vulnerable. And basically, what this says is the U.S. commerce would grind to a halt in a matter of days if these ports were hit with a cyber attack. In the aftermath of crippling cyber attack on the nation's ports, including Baltimore, they are ill-prepared to handle anything like this. The study concluded that the failure to bolster defenses against hackers could lead to disruption of computer networks used to move goods, fuel, food from ships to marketplaces. Shelves at grocery stores and gas tanks at service stations would run empty, the study said. A halt in energy supplies would likely send not just a ripple but a shock wave through the U.S. and even the global economy. So basically, let me just read on here. Basically, this would quickly disrupt cargo operations and slowly ripple out to impact 1/3 of the U.S. population, which resides within an overnight drive of the port. So basically, they're telling us that if these ports are also hit with cyber attacks, that we would have major, major problems, and the food on the shelves would go empty, people would not have fuel in their cars, and many other supplies that you receive would dry up. And this is why when we say we need to start prepping, make sure you have food, water, toiletries, batteries, rechargeable batteries, a solar recharger to recharge those batteries, lanterns that work on solar power that you can, charge them up using the sun. Have weapons, because when people can't get supplies and food, guess what happens? They start, and the food shelves are empty, they start to go house to house looking for supplies. And this also goes into the same circumstance of the main event of a cyber attack on the infrastructure of the United States and also in other countries around the world, hitting the power grid, which they've told us over and over, and I've been over this in many episodes. This will also shut things down, and this is why people need to be prepared. And if you haven't started to prepare, I would start preparing. And also, gold and silver, very important. I mean, we just went over that the Bundesbank is telling us, and many, many people have been telling us that China is to become the next reserve currency. We're going to see the collapse of the U.S. dollar. We're going to see the collapse of many financial institutions. They will go on and do bail-ins. And I hate to say it, but gold and silver is a great way of protecting against bail-ins, because look what happened in Cyprus. If those people kept their wealth, and even with gold and silver going down, let's think about this for a sec. Let's say, okay, I had 10 ounces of gold, and I'm just going to make it simple, and 100 ounces of silver. That was my savings, okay? And I turned my savings into gold and silver. And instead of having that money in the bank, I took it all out, and I have it gold and silver, and I keep it in my safe. Cyprus, okay, that person, they were hit with a bail-in. So if they had that money in the bank, they would lose a percentage. The rest, a part of the percentage, would be exchanged into worthless bank stock, because the bank is defaulting, and they're giving you bank stock when they're taking your money. I mean, it really makes perfect sense. And the rest of your money is frozen, and you're on capital controls, which they still are, and it's going over 100 days now. And you're only allowed a certain amount each day. Even if you took and you had the gold and silver there, you would be able to trade that in. Or if you had half gold, half silver, and the rest in cash, you would be okay. There would be nothing in your bank account for them to take. Maybe a couple dollars for them to, a couple euros for them to, that you kept in there to pay bills, but the rest you would have. You would have kept. And this is why it's so important to prep on all aspects of prepping. And basically, gold and silver are on sale right now. The price keeps going down. Thank you, Ben Bernanke, and all those people that are pushing it down. Again, the central banks, the banks, financial institutions, the main investors, they're gobbling it up like crazy. You should do the same. I'm doing it. I mean, think about it. So, I mean, I know there's premiums on it and on the silver and gold, but they're not that bad. But right now, you can get stuff really cheap. Listen, everyone, I want to thank you for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.